Today we're going to be working on exploring a hip hinge, which is an important foundational movement for downward facing dog. When you come into downward facing dog, and I'll just use one leg on my friend Bonaparte here for ease of viewing and holding on to the skeleton. So when you come into downward facing dog, your legs are back on an angle like so. And then instead of having your spine lined up with your legs, you need to move your pelvis on the bones of the legs as you come into the pose. If your pelvis doesn't move well on your thigh bone like so, it's going to affect the curves of your spine, and that's going to affect where your weight is and how your hands and arms feel in the pose. So to work on the hinge, we're going to do this in standing, and you can have a wall behind you. And if balance is an issue for you, you can also be in a corner as I am and have an additional wall or a piece of furniture or even a chair in front of you to hold on to as you're working in this skill. You're going to want to have some space between your feet and the wall, just a little bit, a foot or so between your feet and the wall. Have your feet underneath your hips somewhere. Doesn't have to be a precise measurement. And we're going to think about the bones of your pelvis moving on the thigh bones while the spine stays in its natural curves. So we're not doing a lot of back bending. We're not doing a lot of rounding forward through the spine, not because it's necessarily a problem to do so, but because we really want to isolate the movement of the hips so that you can learn what that movement feels like and hopefully get a little better at doing it. So the basic movement is going to look like this. You're going to keep your shin bones more or less up and down with your knees over your ankles. It does not have to be perfect. And if you find that your forefoot is lifting up for now, you might just let your knees come a little bit more forward so that you can maintain some weight in your forefoot. You are then going to bend your knees and your hips at the same rate and send your sitting bones back towards the wall behind you. So all kinds of things can happen when we do this. We're really looking to think about the hips going back to the wall, the pelvis moving on top of the legs, and bending the knees as we go. So there's a movement at the hips and a movement at the knees, not so much anything happening through the spine and shoulders. There's a couple of things you can do to facilitate this. You can bring your hands onto your hips to feel what your pelvis is doing. You could also grab a broomstick or a dowel of some kind and hold it through the hinge of your hips, or just bring your hands into the hinge of your hips, into that hip crease area in the front of your hips, and really think about sending that back as the pelvis tilts forward over the tops of the thigh bones. This should not be uncomfortable, so we don't want any symptoms going up, including any kind of sensation in your knees or your back. Okay. If you're having difficulty, definitely get another pair of eyes, get your movement professionally assessed, and get some assistance with this movement if you need it. Okay? So we're looking to practice finding this rhythm where we're able to move the hips and the knees at the same rate and really get good movement of the pelvis on the leg bones before we transfer this into another pose like downward facing dog, where there's a lot more going on. Have fun exploring. I hope this is interesting, and I would love to hear how it goes for you.